Thank you for joining us today for our ETRAGE webinar series. Our design and manufacturing focused webinars are hosted twice a month. You can find future webinars at etrage.com under events. Today, we look at the ever-evolving needs of cybersecurity within Industry 4.0 to protect intellectual property. A few housekeeping items. Everyone is muted. If you have a question, please use the Q&A icon. A recording will be available on our ETRAGE YouTube channel later this week. Today, we'll do a quick introduction of ETRAGE, then go into the topic of today, our security for manufacturing, and then there will be time for questions. My name is Sinead Kimbrell. I am the Director of Sales Enablement at ETRAGE. Prior to 2013 and entering the PTC channel, I was focused on adult education. I used my skills of assessing and game planning and continue to utilize those skills to help the manufacturing industry today. With me is Zach Johnson. He has been working in IT and security for over 24 years. ETRAGE, we are a software development and service company. We have been around for over 23 years, partnering with PTC to expand PLM adoption through our software solutions, services, and training. We are a global company with staff in North America, Europe, and Asia. ETRAGE has developed many software solutions that expand the use of Windchill PLM across an organization. You can see some of those listed on the screen. If you want to learn more, please check out past webinars on our YouTube channel or sign up for future webinars at etrage.com. Additionally, ETRAGE is always developing new solutions to address the needs of the manufacturing industry. We provide Windchill services like cloud hosting and upgrades, training on PTC products, and security. Please do not hesitate to reach out after today's webinar if you're looking for help in your PLM adoption. And with that, I will turn it over to Zach to address today's topic of IT security.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Sinead, for that lovely introduction. So today's topic is one very near and dear to my heart, and we want to talk about enterprise IT security, specifically as an element of Industry 4.0. It seems non-intuitive that it would be an element of that, but with the idea of more horizontal integration between systems, it becomes ever more important that the way those systems interact is done so in a secure manner, as well as the fact that the intellectual property floating about in those systems is the crown jewel of what's trying to be protected. So, to sort of get a little overview on what we offer as a stack and how that ties into the concepts of uh, enterprise cybersecurity, we have to talk about enterprise risk management. So, looking at this chart here, um, we see three main components that we focus on as delivery of our stack. I like to start with governance because governance is basically the rules, right? That's defining what needs to be done and why it needs to be done, right? That's going to be where the critical data is defined. It's going to be what standards you have to meet, what regulations are in play, and those are all very, very important and set the conversation for everything that happens afterwards. The next thing to focus on is your security architecture. The architecture is like the framework of the machine that is cybersecurity that you're trying to build, right? It's how you build out your environment to optimize uh, to the delivery of cybersecurity. So, some examples would be configuring your network to maximize the ability to investigate and monitor traffic and the movement of data, or having firewalls that are configured properly, having backups to mitigate the risk of data loss, the ability to monitor and manage your systems. Um, to control access to data and identities, it's so on and so forth. Build out all of those things correctly, and you um, can then move on to the next section, which is the security operations aspect. This is the tools that get plugged into that framework you built under your architecture. This is, a very broad spectrum, but like our stack consists of a selection of tools that we have worked very hard to integrate and make a best in class sort of integrated system. All of that connects into the ideal architecture that we've consulted and built out. Uh, and that's kind of where my specialty is, right? I'm an expert on the security architecture and the security operations piece of all of this. While we do have experts on the governance side of things, that is not necessarily my focus, but I am keenly aware of it. Um, I highly specialize in uh, the operations components, right? Like I build all of that out, and I drive its uh, I drive its function towards the success and end goal of being well developed. So to give some good examples of what I'm talking about, I've got a few case studies here. So in this first case study, we have a large manufacturing company specializing in oil and gas, producing products within that space. And during the course of our interactions with them, there was an sort of very unexpected staffing shift. Uh, Several key personnel uh, uh, gave their notice within the course of the project we were working on, and that suddenly caused a pivot in the priorities of what was going on. So they communicated to us that, like, there was a sudden shift in needs, and they're like, well, is there anything you can do for us? And we pivoted into uh, basically building out a temporary IT operations system for them. Um, on a few days' notice, we were able to take our engineering team that was building out the scope for the project we were working on and position them as a sort of documentation discovery uh, escalation team for our help desk. And on a Friday morning at 9 a.m. they start opening tickets, and we have no documentation, no credentials, no processes, and that gets escalated to our engineering team, who are very rapidly uh, discovering the credentials, gaining access to systems, resolving the issues, writing the processes, and then flipping those back down to the lower tiers, and just doing that in a cycle. And it started at 9 a.m. on a Monday, by close of or sorry on a Friday, and then by close of business on Monday, we had a very smooth system in place, and we're able to uh, tr- give the client about 3 months of like good solid operation while they restaffed, and then we switched back to our original project, and we were able to implement that in a high quality way, because now we had documented their environment very, very deeply. This is a good example of what I like to call an unknown unknown, right? Nobody could have planned for this. But having access to vendors that can do, uh, shall we say, bespoke solutions very with a rapid turnaround, with very little information. Um, yeah, this is a great example of enterprise IT risk, right? Risk management is about being aware that there are unknowns, and you need to have contingencies uh, that are generalized for these unknown risks that may be lurking, that you'll have to deal with. Um, our next case here is a similar concept in the where success, even success can be a risk, right? We in this company, they started out as just a family working out of their garage manufacturing hair products. um, they had unprecedented success. They inside of 3 years they went from 10 people to over 100 people, in pretty decent sized manufacturing facility. They did not have the experience to be able to implement more mature IT operations and security operations. And it happened so fast that they weren't able to develop those skill sets. And this, led to poor infrastructure, poor policies, poor configurations, and major gaps in their cybersecurity posture. And this led to a breach. Credit card data was taken, and they had to react quickly. And so we were brought in to m- remediate the situation. So, there was an incident response investigation where we've cleaned up the environment, threw the threat actor out, and then had to fix it. We did that by conducting some pen testing and found their gaps, their weaknesses, and built them a roadmap to being able to address that and assisted along the way. And uh, the payment card problem was addressed, and they got themselves back into good standing with the payment card processors, which was a very critical thing for what they do. um and a lot of that was infrastructure focused, right? They lacked operational maturity, sure, but the everything was ad hoc. There was a lot of systems that there was no time for planning. They simply needed to go, 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 right? Like, roll it out, make it work for now, we'll figure it out later kind of scenarios. And that introduced a lot of risk. And that, in this case, the risk um, was exploited, and they took some very serious costs to that. But uh, all of that, they were able to get through it, and they returned to the full graces of the credit card companies. Third case study is a much smaller company, and I find this to be an example of uh, a lack of mature processes and procedures and training, intersecting with the best of intentions. So this was a small design firm, and they specialized in military and commercial products. They were doing some work with a classified data, technical data package, and they an engineer wanted to go on vacation, but didn't want to get behind on work, so copied that technical data package to an external hard drive, and it inadvertently wound up leaving the country without permission or authorization. uh Obviously, this does not bode well when it comes to the standards that apply here, like DFARS and ITAR. And CMMC and NIST dictates many administrative and technical controls that could have been in place to address this. We assisted them in remediating these deficiencies. Uh, we helped them develop SOPs, standards documents, TTPs, protocols, security awareness training, and then technical controls for monitoring and protecting data in their environment, so that the incidental leaking of data was greatly mitigated. This does have a happy ending in that they were able to correct all of the deficiencies, and the project was initiated after passing an audit. Uh, and this is a really good example because there's not a nefarious threat actor here. In fact, in any of these case studies, there's not really a threat actor. There's no threat that most people perceive it, right? It's not some hacker in a hoodie sitting in a basement trying to like steal your data or ransom you. Uh, but these are actual threats. The And that's why we can circle back to this chart here, and that's why all of this stuff like has to work together. um the the governance has to talk about what the risks are, speaking with risk professionals, um who are experts at evaluating risk. That's one of the biggest challenges we see in the industry today, is that the discussion of risk isn't really happening. The discussion of like what could go wrong from multiple perspectives isn't happening. People are focusing on the checkbox nature of the uh, the frameworks. So people are getting into NIST, CSF, and just trying to meet the requirements at a bare minimum level and then move on. There's no discussion on the actual and risk. And because governance and the discussion of risk is what drives everything else, that means that those deficiencies at the top of the chain are reflected lower down. So architecture is not being looked at from the perspective of security. And because architecture is not well optimized, the security operations piece of it is deficient. There are missing tools. There are tools that aren't configured properly. There are uh, elements that aren't being collected into your sim. There's all sorts of deficiencies that get reflected from not having that conversation at the very beginning about what risk is and what can be done about it, and what needs to be done about it. Appetite for risk is a big part of that. And hopefully today you gain a little bit of perspective on why that's important and why we have the tools to help you remediate that and have those conversations and implement those facets. And with that, I think we can go into the questions. Uh, I am happy to answer questions if you have any.
Beck, it looks like we have our first question, which is, how do we start this conversation with our IT department when there have been breaches on their watch previously?
That is a fantastic question. IT departments are not security departments. That's this is a separate specialty, right? Yes, it's within the realm of IT. If we go back to that slide, you see three different pieces here: security architecture and security operations. Security architecture and IT actually overlap quite a bit. It's about implementing typical IT systems, file servers, domain controllers, etc., firewalls, backups. All of that stuff is very much in the wheelhouse of IT. And when we talk about it from a security perspective, it's about implementing it in a specific way. But looking at the security operations side of things, this is where you start to diverge from IT's specialty, right? Uh, System admins and architects aren't going to know how to properly tune an EDR. They're not going to know how to build out a SIM. They don't know how to structure a security operations center. They aren't going to know how to staff it. These aren't the specialties of IT. Um, and taking that in mind, uh, you can approach your IT department with like, look, we know this isn't your specialty. You also recognize that you're probably overworked, understaffed, and under budgeted. And that's how you approach them with it. It's just like, we know it wasn't your fault. uh, you don't want to blame them, because then they're going to get defensive, and defensive IT people hide deficiencies. They don't reveal them for being addressed. Um, and that's almost a culture problem, right? But that's the best way to sort of approach it. Is to come to them with open hands and say, look, we know this isn't your fault, but like, help us make it better. I hope that makes sense.
We have another question. All of the projects that you described in your case studies, were they completed remotely or do you need to be on site?
It's mix and match. Some elements have to be done on site. Some elements can be done remotely. Some elements can be broken up into two different facets, working remotely and on site. Uh, it depends on these specific projects. The first case study, we actually had nobody on site. It was 100% remote, which makes it all the more impressive in my mind. But it was completely remote. Now the second one, um, we were on site for that one, but only because PCI standards dictate that it has to be on site. You can't do 100% of the pen test remotely. There has to be at least one on-site element. You can kind of get around that by using jump boxes. So if it needs to be 100% remote, quote unquote, in the sense that there are no human bodies there, but there are physical resources there, that can be done. Um, so it's on a needs by needs basis, but we figure that out at the outset during scoping, and we can work within whatever constraints that you have.
That's a good segue to the next question, which is how does an organization get started down this path? What's the first step?
I think a really good first step is to engage a risk professional, a consulting firm, whoever. We can have a conversation about that. But having a assessment done, a gap analysis and risk assessment, because that's going to tell you a lot of where your deficiencies are. It's not, and it's going to give you an idea of what needs to happen for remediation. If that's a conversation people want to have with our sales team, that is a conversation they can have. But that is an excellent first step. Is like, you're at risk, and we need to understand what that risk is. Have somebody look at the risk.
And then one last question. How do you get an executive to buy in when they don't believe security is important, when they think what they have today is just fine?
The age-old question: how to get the executive buy-in. There are many techniques, and it depends on the executive, but as a general sense, the best way to approach the conversation about security with uh, the executives is to frame everything from the business perspective, right? Don't just say we need security, when they because the age old question after that is why. And then many technical leaders sort of fumble at that one because it's necessary. It's circuitous. So reframe the question is what is the impact on the business of not having security? Um, a little mind exercise I like to use with executives each executive has different priorities, right? Like focusing on different things. I like to ask the question is, if you woke up tomorrow and saw that our company was in the news for something bad, what would that bad thing be? Like, what is the worst thing you would like to see talked about from your perspective in the news tomorrow? HR is going to have a different answer than the CEO. The CTO might have a different answer. The CFO is going to have a different answer. Everybody's going to have a slightly different answer to that question. And you step down the chain to SVPs or director level, they're going to have slightly different answers. And so, based on their answers, you can then come up with case studies around what the risk of their thing, their worst nightmare is. Um, and you can reframe how like having security controls would prevent that thing that they are subconsciously concerned about. That's a great way to kind of do that. It's not the only way, but it's a way I've used in the past with great success. Also ties in nicely with having a tabletop exercise done. Tabletops are great at forcing executives to sit down and think about the bad thing and its impact and what they would do in that situation. Um, again, if you talk to a risk professional, many risk professional consultancies can also conduct tabletops with you. Um, that's an excellent exercise in contemplating the impact of their concerns. Hopefully that answers your question.
Well, thank you, Zach. That was the last written question that we had for today. If you could flip to the last slide. If you do have any questions that come up after viewing this webinar, please reach out to us, sales@etrage.com, and we will be happy to get back to you. Again, thank you so much, and we'll see you all in a few weeks.